the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 364. Leave them kids alone? Misogyny. I feel like I maybe used the same number twice because I feel like I said 364 last week. I'm sorry if I did. We'll have to fix it later. This might be 365. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And in the background, we have the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, running the show. Tonight, we are looking a little bit more at the toxic sisterhood. And once again, they are tattling on themselves. But before we get into that, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. Definitely take a look through our blog, because while we do have a lot of posts that are just us posting the shows and everything, if you look back through various months throughout the history of our blog over the last, I think we started it in 2014. We might have even started it in 2013. But during that time, we have covered a wide range of men's issues, and also issues related to the Gamergate controversy that were not necessarily male specific, but were consumer specific. And there was a lot of overlap, actually, between the men's movement and the consumer revolt in Gamergate, because You Keep Women Out of Gaming was being used as an attack to prevent the consumers from complaining about unethical ad practices and unethical contest rigging practices and stuff like that. So it's definitely worth a look. Anybody who is not like an old school Honey Badger follower, you might find a lot of interesting things in that blog. So down in the drop down menu, as you scroll down, you'll see you can find previous years and every month, and you can go through and look at titles, and you'll find that as you go farther back, there will be more and more titles that are articles and written articles, and not just posts about our live streams. So, and we still do have the occasional, we still have written articles today, right? We still have things getting published today. There's plenty of stuff to comment on, plenty of conversations to be had. So take a look. But in the meantime, speaking of conversations to be had, the feminists are being feminists. They're feministing, and we have to talk about this shit. Because it's expensive, and because some of the stuff that these guys have admitted in this post here is just, in my opinion, the best expressed response is, whoa, Nelly. So we looked at this page last time. I think the first thing that I wanted to start with was where they talked about, I just had this open to the right page, and it seems to have like gone back to. There was, yeah, here we go. So the Office of Civil Rights. That's what I was looking at before. The Office of Civil Rights. There were two offices of civil rights, right? And they were complaining because the president closed one of them. And I believe I just was looking at, there we go, closed the Office of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity at the Social Security Administration. So if you just look at this list and you don't know, it makes it sound like the president got rid of the Office of Civil Rights. Like you can't protest to the government now if you're discriminated against at work. But that is not what really happened. So the order that was given, this is very deceptive, by the way. And this is how feminists, I wanted to include this one tonight because I want you to understand how feminists use scare tactics to get women who don't dig too deep to support their cause. Right? What happens if women can't sue for discrimination? And, feminists have got all these women convinced that the workplaces are all discriminating against them, even though women get preferential treatment in hiring and promotion, in like pay evaluation, everything. And it's a rare situation where a woman is not getting preferential treatment, much less where a woman is facing discrimination because she's female, and only because she's female, right? But so this says it all right here in the headline. Social Security dissolves duplicative office. Right? Everything that the OCR for Social Security does, the OCR does. So they both do exactly the same things in regard to the Social Security system. Just the OCR, the overall OCR, does it for all workplaces, for the military, I think, for any area where you can sue for discrimination that involves your income, right? The Office of Civil Rights is supposed to protect everyone from being mistreated at work in terms of hiring, promotion, opportunity. It's the Office of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity for a reason. So they don't need a separate one to deal with the Social Security Administration, especially since, given the fact that it is a government agency, it should already not be discriminating against people on the basis of any demographic, right? Like you would think if the government is policing discrimination, then we shouldn't need a separate agency within the government to police the government. They're supposed to be policing people, the public, for discrimination. You shouldn't have to have a separate civil rights office just for that, especially given that the Social Security Administration handles disability claims, right? And Social Security is pretty straightforward in terms of what it's supposed to do. You get to a certain age, you're eligible to receive a monthly check based on what you paid in. If you worked the correct amount of quarters, paid in the correct amount of quarters to get a check, and if you work that many quarters, or if you become disabled while you are underage, then you become eligible for disability if you have a condition that prevents you from being able to work. Like those are the two things that the Social Security Administration does. That's it. That's all it does. It's not supposed to do any other special, designations. It's not supposed to deal with what color you are or where your ancestors come from, whether you're male or female or any of that. It does if you have underage kids when you die, then they may get a benefit from your Social Security. If you have if you lose both of your parents as a child, there's an orphan benefit. It's basically for extreme circumstances, and also for people who couldn't plan for their retirement. It's become the baby boomers started using it as, this is for people who didn't plan for their retirement, and Gen X has kind of done the same thing. But aside from that, it really didn't have a need or a purpose for this separate office. Like, what do? Keep the agency that pays when it's time from discriminating on the basis of color and race and religion. Like, why would they need a whole separate organization for that unless there was really something wrong with the Social Security Administration? So, just saying, this complaint is just scaremongering. And what ends up happening is then, feminists will raise money on stuff like this. Oh my gosh, President Trump's getting rid of equal opportunities. He's getting rid of the Office for Civil Rights. How can you sit by and let this happen? When he didn't. Got rid of a duplicate of that office in an environment that shouldn't need one. Right? So they probably raised a lot of money based on this. They probably got a lot of women going, oh, be able to sue for discrimination. We got to do something about this. Here, now, take our money. As the scaremongering of the feminists. And of course, it makes their list longer. It gives them a lot higher number of things they can say. So the next thing I wanted to look at here, and this is all going to be related. I saw these things as related, and I thought, you know what, we need to talk about them in conjunction with each other. So we're looking at education again. Here we go. Reduced protections for students in sexual misconduct cases. Well, is that true? Let's take a look. I believe this is the right one. Yeah. So, this is a Dear Colleague letter. You remember the Dear Colleague letter 2011?
Oh,
been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, but I do.
So let's look at before we get into the rest of this, we'll just briefly go over the history of this, right? Remember Title IX, and I've talked about this before. Title IX was passed initially following complaints by feminists that universities were operating on a quota system wherein they reserved a certain number of seats in courses, like if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, so medicine, law, certain business courses and stuff, that when you graduate, part of what the university wants from you is that you go on and make a name for yourself and maybe come back later and donate to the university because you've made a lot of money. But you've made a name for yourself so that you can go back and like the university can say, hey, this person graduated from here, come to school here and you'll be successful like they are, right? And a lot of women, they get their degree, they might work for a while in the field, and then they would start having their babies, and their career was done, or it didn't go the way that a man's career went. They slowed down. They didn't bring the prestige to the university like a man would. And so in the earlier, up to the middle part of the 20th century, it was pretty common for universities to still say, if you want to, you want to be a lawyer, you got to be a dude. You want to be a doctor, you got to be a dude. If you want to take these courses, we'll reserve a certain small number of seats for women, but most of these are reserved for men. And, if more men than women want to take these courses, you got to compete for those smaller number of seats that are not reserved for men. And so Title IX was passed to say that the universities could not do that. They had to not reserve any seats, no quotas, no nothing. But at the same time as that was happening, I don't know Like this, the feminist revolution wasn't really that much of a revolution. People think it was, but you started to see more women who didn't have to get jobs getting jobs. You started to see more women wanting careers, wanting to make a name for themselves, wanting to be famous for something other than being a pretty face, right? And so they would have careers, and especially in starting in the 70s and 80s, you had these female power careers, like girl boss ideas come out. They didn't call it that, but it changed the way women went to school. It changed the way women acted after they graduated, and universities were starting to react to that already by the time Title IX passed in 1972. So pretty soon they didn't really have anything to enforce. Right? They created an office. They created a entity to enforce Title IX, and these people had nothing to do and were in danger of losing their cushy government jobs. So what do? Well, you expand, right, what your mission is. You engage in mission creep. So the first mission creep of Title IX went from equal opportunities in the academic aspect of university to equal opportunities in the athletic aspects of university. So extracurricular activities. And what they basically did was they decided that however many male sports activities were available, whether it was football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, gymnastics, track, golf, anything that was open to male athletes, there had to be an equivalent for female athletes, or they had to let women create one. And they decided um, that they were going to handle this by a quota system, which was kind of ironic since the law was passed to get rid of quota systems. So essentially, if you had a university where 60% of the interest in athletic participation came from men and only 40% came from women, and women were not inclined to increase their interest because they were going to university for other purposes and didn't really want the distraction of sports, then they had to get rid of men's sports programs. So throughout the late 80s, early 90s, up into the 2000s, Title IX was used to eliminate multiple universities' Olympic wrestling programs and Olympic gymnastics programs because they weren't going to get rid of their football teams. Their football teams were profitable and actually paid for facilities that most of their athletics were taking place in. And the female end of that, like their women's basketball and stuff like that, wasn't quite as profitable. So they really couldn't, like, they spared a lot of money to recruit male athletes, but not as much to recruit female athletes because of that. At the high school level, a different thing happened. You ended up with girls suing to get on wrestling teams because they didn't have like 6 or 8 girls that wanted to start a wrestling team, a girls wrestling team. They might have one girl who wanted to wrestle, or one girl who wanted to play football, or one girl who wanted to play golf. So they would demand to be allowed on the boys' team, and if the school didn't cooperate, they would sue. And then, with depending on the sport, it would affect the way the boys' participation could take place. Like, it wasn't so bad with golf. Golf, anybody can do that, right? Anybody can be on the track team. Anybody can be on the cross country team. It probably would have been more of an issue if there hadn't been girls' basketball teams, right? And in that instance, you're looking at getting body checked by a girl could be uncomfortable for a guy. Like, that's a little too close, things like that, especially in high school. But on the wrestling team, it was a disaster for the boys because they're in a situation where they're in close quarters, they're in front of everybody, and they are wrestling with someone who is of the protected sex that they are not allowed to be rough with. And here they are, they're supposed to put this person in holds, they're supposed to take her down to the mat. Like, so there were a lot of guys that just forfeited their matches. And there were girls that got up to the state level on that nobody wrestled them until they got up to the state level. And then there were guys at that level that, like, they couldn't just say, I'm not going to wrestle this girl, because there were scholarships at stake. There were recruiters at stake that they'd show up and they'd watch the state match, and if a guy was particularly good, they'd want to offer him a scholarship to join the wrestling team of a particular university. And there weren't a whole lot of universities that did that, but there were enough that that was the case. And then all of a sudden, the match is over in like less than 20 seconds. And I photographed matches like that.
It's
I
kind of
I saw that happen.
It's like a fucked up version of the Peter principle.
Mm-hmm.
That where people keep getting promoted. If they're too good for their job, they get promoted, and if they're still too good for that job, they get promoted, and they keep getting promoted until they get to the job they suck at. And then they're stuck in that job forever, sucking at it forever. And this is an almost, it's a parable worthy of Disney. You just everyone refuses to fight you until you find the person who doesn't refuse to fight you, and at that point you're 10 times more foobar than you were at the level at which you're even trained to operate at.
And you get your ass kicked. You get your ass kicked hard. And I had a classmate that went through that with having to wrestle a girl or drop out. I also had a classmate whose older brother had to deal with that, like having to wrestle a girl or drop out. And then there were some guys that were younger than me that wrestled the girl and then got called all kinds of nasty, like, you thug, you abuser, you big meanie for winning the match. Which, like, if she's gonna have that, then don't join the boys wrestling team. Okay. But so that was like the 80s, the 90s, and then there were also girls that did this with football teams. Now, a lot of them joined and just became the kicker. So they would practice with the guys, they would go out on the field with the guys and everything. But when it came down to what was their function in game, they kicked. They didn't do anything else. They just kicked field goals. And so there were a lot of gals that didn't face the brunt of men's bigger bodies and men's thicker bones, young men. And believe me, if you're a sophomore on a team where you're like a 15-year-old girl and you're facing sophomores, juniors, and seniors who may be 18 and much more developed and much bigger and so on, you're looking at a potential for significant injuries. So there was a gal that went to my school a few years before I went to school there. And when she was in junior high, she could play football with the boys, right? When she was in high school, she played football with the same boys after more years of puberty, and she broke her collarbone. And I know she had another broken bone, but the collarbone was what got her. She's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm too, my men's bones are thicker than women's bones. Boys' bones are thicker than girls' bones after they start going through puberty. And they build that up specifically, evolutionarily, I guess, because of the hits that they take in fighting with each other, and the bigger bodies that they're building, that those bones are going to have to hold up. So it's not really necessarily a good thing when you have a lot of gals on a tackle football team, right? Now, a lot of schools had powder puff football or flag football, where the girls could play and nobody's allowed to tackle anybody, nobody's allowed to hit anybody. You know, like you shoulder them down. Nobody's allowed to do that. Right? You just have to grab the flag, and those are fine. But there was a lot of girls joining. In fact, one of my former bosses at one of the workplaces I tried out for a while was a football player on her high school football team. She was short too. She was not a tall woman, but this was kind of weird. But she was in Syracuse, not my area, so she wasn't dealing with the corn-fed 300-pound Ohio linebackers, but she played, and I'm sure, you know, she felt very, not necessarily feminist, but very advanced in, you know, girl power and everything about that. But the drawback for boys when a girl takes a place like that is that, you know, the field goal can be a very important aspect of the game. Sometimes people win just by that much, one field goal. And so if you have a good kicker that is going to make that goal every time, never miss, never, you know, kick low enough that the other team can knock it out of the air and intercept it, then you know, you really want that, right? And so that's another scholarship opportunity for guys. That's another educational opportunity for guys, where if you're in a league where a lot of the teams are fairly evenly matched, and the difference is the kickers, there are guys that have gotten scholarships to university because, in addition to being good at other aspects of the game, you know, he's a great kicker. And when you have somebody that comes out and all they do is kick, it takes away from that guy's opportunity to show what he can do. And she's not going to get a scholarship to be on a college football team. She's just going to get a lot of attention for being a girl on a high school football team. Then she's going to go off and do something else. And so it might be fun for her, but it's not fair for him, right? Now, if it's one thing if the team just doesn't have anybody that can do that, and a girl comes along and is like, I can do it. I do ballet. I can kick really well, you know, or something along those lines. I played soccer. I can kick really well. But that's not always the case. And I've known guys that suspected that, you know, if that girl hadn't been there, they'd have gotten more attention from college recruiters than they got, and maybe gotten to expand their choice of universities. So that's what Title IX was doing before the 21st century. And close to the end of the 20th century, close to the end of the 90s, then there was, you know, starting to be this little grumbling about, well, you know, boys and girls at the college level and even at the high school level now, they pretty much have the same sports opportunities. If women want a sport, they get it started. If women want to be on a boys team, they join the boys team. There's no lack of opportunities. We don't really need Title IX anymore, right? So you get the Clery Act. Oh, no. We got to have Title IX. The Title IX administration now has to track sexual misconduct between students on university campuses. Like it's now human resources for university campuses. Sexual misconduct, harassment, discrimination, you know, yeah, we're going to do that now. And then in 2011, there was this Dear Colleague letter that specifically ordered universities. There were universities already doing this. I went to one that did. That specifically ordered universities to set up a court system in the university. They called them tribunals, where you had administrative staff or professors that would be the judge and jury essentially in this tribunal. If a student made a complaint of some sort of sexual misconduct or interpersonal conflict that constituted a harassing behavior, especially if it was sexual harassment or harassment over any protected area, that they had to, instead of going to the real court system, they had to report that to the university, and then the university would have this hearing, and they would bring out witnesses and evidence and everything, and then the university would make a judgment whether the individual was responsible for the complaint, the accused individual was responsible for the complaint or not. And what the Title IX enforcement administration did was they sent out this letter stating, the education department sent out this letter stating that universities had to use a different standard than the court system for that. They had to use something called a preponderance of evidence standard. So if you, for instance, get accused of, say, either rape or any other crime that is equivalent to that violent crime, and you go to court, you get arrested, somebody files a complaint against you, you get arrested, you get questioned about it, you get your lawyer, you go to court. The court has to use the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed the crime and that it was you, not just that the crime happened, but that it was you. And that's why, like, DNA gets used in those cases. It's why you look for things like video, you look for things like injuries. It's why rape kits are done in hospitals to gather evidence for these cases. And so the reason for that is because, if you get convicted, we're talking years to decades in jail for those kind of crimes. So in university campuses, they can't send people to jail. Right? Your state university, like Ohio State, finds somebody guilty of, or finds somebody responsible for committing rape on a campus. They cannot put that individual in any type of incarceration. All they can do is expel them, tell them they can't come back to the university ever, and blacklist them with other universities that may then say, sorry, you can't come to this campus either. So they can destroy their educational opportunities for the rest of their lives, right? So after that happened, universities began using that standard of evidence, but they also began following further guidance that was feminist-based, that led to evidence being ignored if it was embarrassing to the accuser. It led to the accused not being able to face their accuser when or cross-examine their accuser when the hearing was taking place. So basically, the accuser could come in and present a whole bunch of claims and evidence, and the accused basically just had to argue against what was presented without necessarily always knowing what they were accused of, without necessarily always having access to all the evidence, without being able to bring in their own witnesses, without having a representative, and without being able to cross-examine the accuser to poke holes in her story, right? So pretty soon there were hundreds of cases where universities were getting sued for violating the students' due process rights. Because we're talking, somebody might be a junior or a senior at their university with $200,000 of debt behind them, having studied something that they're expecting to use to earn money for the rest of their lives. And then suddenly the university kicks them out, doesn't refund any of that. They still have to pay back all the loans, but now they're not going to have a way to do it. And they haven't done anything, but they can't get the university to recognize their evidence. And, there have been instances where guys that were accused weren't even alone with the accuser. So you don't even have the ability to be like, well, If I just don't put myself in a situation where somebody can falsely accuse me, I'm safe, because you don't have to be in a situation, right? All you have to be is, in the crosshairs of some chick. She might pick you out of a classroom roster. She might not like something that you said to somebody else that doesn't have anything to do with her. She might approach you and get turned down and get mad about it. There were some students that did that. There was a student that went into a guy's dorm room, molested his roommate, who was blackout drunk, and then months later accused him of raping her. And so there have been numerous stories of young men at universities who were minding their own business, even were in their own rooms without any contact with a woman that was intentional, and they were accused and they were thrown out of school and had to fight this. And there currently, right now, there are like 800 or 900 lawsuits in the United States that are still in progress because due process rights were not followed, were not respected at universities. And that's where Title IX basically went up to right before Trump came into office. So in 2020 or in 2016, when Trump became president, one of the things that he did was he started looking at this situation with universities, and he had his Department of Education reverse the requirements for university tribunals, and instead of requiring a preponderance of evidence standard, they basically said any other thing that you're hearing, like universities have to do hearings on things like plagiarism and other, like, people getting into fistfights and other things like that. If they use a beyond a reasonable doubt standard for that, they cannot use the preponderance of evidence standard for sexual misconduct. They have to use a beyond a reasonable doubt standard for that too. So they can't use a lower standard for accusations of sexual misconduct than they do for other equivalent types of misconduct. And they're obligated to encourage and assist accusers to take the accusation to law enforcement and have it go through a real court system and not just a university court system. The reason for that is because false accusers are more reticent to go to police with their accusation. They're more likely to go to somebody who isn't going to vet their accusation, and they don't want to have to deal with a system where they have to prove their accusation. So there are a bunch of other changes. In addition to switching to the due process standard, right? They had to also start allowing accused students a means of cross-examining their accuser, even if they had to have a representative do it, even if there were accommodations the accuser had to have for it. They still had to have some means of cross-examining the accuser, so her story didn't just stand as evidence unchallenged. They had to allow if they allowed a representative for the accuser, they had to allow a representative for the accused, and it's so on. Basically, started restoring due process rights on university campuses. So what this says here: reduced protections for students in sexual misconduct cases, and reversed President Biden's expansion of Title IX interpretation that recognized harassment or exclusion based on sexual orientation or gender identity as a form of discrimination. It's a half-truth, right? They didn't reduce protections. What they did was they increased protections for accused students in those circumstances. So the Trump administration restored protections that they had created during their first administration for due process rights for students on university campuses. And the reality is, this is something that happens. This can happen to both sexes. Mostly happens to men, but it can happen to both sexes. It can happen to all races. You don't have to have done anything stupid to be accused of doing anything wrong. And you don't even have to, hang out with the wrong woman, right? You can be completely and utterly uninvolved until the day that she decides that she's going to target you. And so this was actually the National Organization for Women saying that if you protect men and boys from being railroaded by false accusers, that's misogynistic, and you're harming women. Like, what an admission that is, right? What an admission. The idea that if you stop women from using lies to rob a guy of his education, from making up a lie and getting a guy convicted based on a lie, that's a female issue, a female specific issue that harms women. What an odd thing to say. What an odd thing to say. And that's not all. All right, so we go on. Let's see. There was another one. All right, erasing our history for K-12 schools and threatening educators. That sounds really dastardly, right? Oh my gosh. They're erasing American history and they're threatening educators. Let's get rid of these two because we already went over them. Ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schooling. So they're saying, this is the executive order, all right? They're saying it censors teaching about race and gender inequality and restricts educators' ability to support inclusion of students exploring their gender identities. What do we got? By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered: parents trust America's schools to provide their children with a rigorous education and instill patriotic admiration for our incredible nation and the values for which we stand. In recent years, however, parents have witnessed schools indoctrinate their children in radical anti-American ideologies while deliberately blocking parental oversight. Such environment operates as an echo chamber in which students are forced to accept these ideologies without questioning or critical examination. In many cases, innocent children are compelled to adopt identities as either victims or oppressors, solely based on their skin color and other immutable characteristics. In other instances, young men and women are made to question whether they were born in the wrong body and whether to view their parents and their reality as enemies to be blamed. These practices not only erode critical thinking, but also sow division, confusion, and distrust, which undermine the very foundations of personal identity and family unity. So what he's saying there, very simply, is schools are psychologically torturing children by subjecting them to ideological practices and ideological indoctrination that makes them question their very identity and puts them in a mentality that is painful. Right? It's literally, he's accusing the schools of child abuse there. It's not a situation where students are coming to teachers with questions and teachers are being told they can't answer those questions. It's a situation, what he's describing is a situation where teachers are imposing those questions on students who were not questioning, not asking, not having difficulties, not concerned, and not suffering until the teacher decided that they should be.
I every time another school shooting happens, everybody, they scratch their heads, they wait for the manifesto. Some people don't, and they, speculate on their own. Oh, how did this person get like this? What was on his mind? And blah. Well, anyway, um, you know what makes school shooters? Fucking schools. Fucking schools. Okay? For every reason that you just listed, right? They're not places that help you anymore. You know what I mean? It's just our school system is hurting our children more than helping them. And just setting them up for the fucking penitentiary, setting them up for failure.
Yeah.
And obviously other things happened in those people's lifetimes that made them do what they did, but it's if kids were homeschooled, you wouldn't really have this issue now, would you?
Not really. Parents don't block themselves from helping their kids, right? They don't block themselves from access to the students' learning materials.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is the thing. What he's describing here, right? Imagine if you had, like, maybe you had custody of kids in your family. I know that you haven't had kids, but you've got kids in your family that you're very dedicated to. Imagine if you were responsible for everything that happens to that child. It's on you. Nobody else is going to protect the child as much as you are. Something, has changed, and that's just the way it is, right? You send your kid to school. I had this happen, right? My son came home from school one day, and he says, "Well, we started sex education today." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I had that when I was, in the fourth grade, but you're a little younger than that." And he's like, "Yeah, they've started now. They start it now in this grade." And I said, "What'd you learn? And what'd you guys talk about?" And he was really vague about it. Right? "Oh, well, we talked about what puberty is going to be like, and what kind of things we can expect to happen to us and stuff." And we talked about the anatomy of the human body and what it does and how it works for just our own. So the girls went to the separate class, the boys went to and I'm like, "Yeah, so they're telling second graders about periods and what dreams now." Right? And I figured it's probably because there's more kids that start puberty early now at the time. But I realize from everything that's happened, I think it's because there are more pedos in the system that creates the school curriculum. So in the unions, essentially. But in any case, we continued, and I was like, "Well, can you tell me some specific things that you were told about?" Because there was already a little bit of rumbling in on social media about kids being taught some things in schools that were inaccurate, and that they were pushing abortion to elementary school students and stuff like that. And there he was like, "Well, some of this stuff I was told I'm not allowed to talk to you about."
What?
Like, big, bright, football size fucking red flag right there.
Oh no.
So I had to stop the car, pull into a parking lot, turn, and kind of said to him, like, "Something that you always need to understand for the rest of your life. As long as you are a kid, the most important people for you to be able to tell things to are your mom and your dad. Nobody else has a right or is right to tell you not to tell us something.
Mm-hmm.
There should be no secrets. No other adult is ever allowed to tell you to keep something secret from us. And if they do, that's a threat to your safety. And you should disobey that no matter who they are. It doesn't matter whether it is another family member, whether it is someone in authority over you at school, the teacher, the principal. Doesn't matter whether it's a police officer, or if you meet the governor and he says that, or if you meet the president of the United States and he says that. Nobody, not a preacher at church, not anybody, should ever tell a child, don't tell your mom and dad about this. There's only one kind of person who tells you to keep secrets from your parents. They are your enemies. And it's a lot for a second grader to handle. But, he kind of nodded. And, then he kind of opened up about it. And he's like, well, this is what we talked about. And compared to what's going on today, it was G Mafia light, right? They were sort of eased into it with talking about if somebody's gay, you shouldn't beat them up for it. Real common sense stuff. Gen X figured that out when we were kids. Like, if somebody's gay, it makes no sense whatsoever to beat them up for it. If somebody tries to sexually assault you, you can beat them up for that. All right. But if somebody's dating somebody that you wouldn't date if you were them, it shouldn't matter whether it's because you find that person unattractive or it's the person's the same sex. You shouldn't beat them up for that. Right. It's that kind of, obviously, it's fair to talk to kids about don't bully people for being different. And you don't have to approve of everybody's lifestyle to recognize that taking things into your own hands and acting violently or abusively as a means of dealing with your differences is a stupid way to live. It will get you into trouble. It doesn't solve any problems, and you're not getting anywhere with that, right? That would be reasonable. And if they had stopped with that, if they had said, okay, this is what we're going to teach, I don't think Gen X would have gotten up in arms about this, right? But as parents, we did in later years, because they went from that to, hey, kid, have you ever questioned your sexuality? You might be gay and just not know it. You might be trans and just not know it. Oh, you like gardening. You can't be a boy if you like gardening. Like, my grandfather was a boxer and a welder, and very, very tough, wiry, not a large man but a strong man. Went hunting, killed bears, brought them home for us to eat, right? And grew roses, absolutely beautiful, that I was allergic to, but I could see them from a distance, right? Absolutely beautiful, beautiful roses, prize winning county fair. I really don't think that anybody has a right to say you're not a man if you do this, you're not a man if you do that thing. It's not an outcropping of immaturity, where you can say, well, you're a little boy if you your primary means of addressing conflict with other people is violence. Like, that's childish. That's one thing, right? But if you grow roses, that's not manly. Are you kidding? There's a science to that. Science is manly. But in any case, yeah, they shuffled it in a little bit at a time, very innocently, and then by the time he was in high school, we had to have regular talks about, just because there are people who have gender dysphoria does not mean that if you aren't 100% typical, stereotypical masculinity, that you must have gender dysphoria, right? And it's okay to respect other people's identity and their experiences, and treat them with dignity and love, just like you would any other human being, and not also have the same sickness. Just like you don't have to have a broken leg because your friend fell off his horse, and you don't have to have bipolar disorder because your friend was born with a chemical imbalance, and You don't have to have PTSD because your friend was a crime victim, right? You don't have to do all these things together. By that's we're talking 6 or 8 years difference there, but between when that started and when it got to that point, and where it is now is just insane. So basically, here's Trump saying, "Don't mind rape children," right? He's imprinting anti-American, subversive, harmful, and false ideologies on our nation's children not only violates longstanding anti-discrimination civil rights law in many cases, but usurps basic parental authority. That's the big one. Nobody has a right to say, don't tell your mom, don't tell your dad about this. It's just between us. Nobody. For example, steering students towards surgical and chemical mutilation without parental consent or involvement, or allowing males access to private spaces dedicated for females, may contravene federal laws that protect parental rights. Now, at my son's school, it was a biological female that accessed the boys' room. So, like they talk about it like it's just something that biological males do, but girls are more impressionable in a lot of ways. They don't question authority as readily as boys do, and like it's a lot easier to con a girl into thinking she has dysphoria that she's not experiencing than it is to con a boy into thinking it, right? So one of the trends that took place during the time frame from about 2011 until now, they started doing this to girls with autism and girls who maybe were lesbians, right? Started convincing, oh, you're a boy trapped in a girl's body. You really identify as a boy. It's not that you're different from other girls, but you're still a girl. If you don't act like the other girls, you must be wrong. Right? You're in the wrong body. The most important thing in this, though, is right here, right? May contravene federal laws that protect parental rights, including the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act and the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. All right. So the way that now is talking about this, you might think that Trump made these things law right before he passed this. Oh, these things I just passed are being violated by what you guys have been doing. So let's take a look here. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. FERPA was passed in 1974.
FERPA?
Yep, FERPA. So this has been in effect longer than, like, this was in effect before I went to school. I was 2 years old when this was passed.
Wow.
Right. I'm 53. So this has been around a while. This gives parents the right to inspect and review students' education records maintained by the schools. They don't have to provide copies unless it's impossible for parents to review the original records, but they do have to make something available so that the parents know what's going on with the student. They have a right to request that the school correct records if they believe to be inaccurate or misleading. Stop the release of personally identifiable information. Get a copy of the institution's policy concerning access to educational records. They have the right, basically, to examine what the school is doing with the child. So this law has actually been interpreted in more than one instance to protect parents' right to school curriculum, to examine school curriculum. What's the child being taught in school? Because you can't judge your child's school records without understanding at least what's being presented. What's my child failing in math for? What's he not getting? Well, we can't tell you that part.
Yeah.
No, you have a right to know that. Right?
Yeah.
What's my child failing health class, which is the class that has sex education in it? What's my child failing health class for? Well, we can't tell you that. Suddenly it's different. I don't think so. You have the right to raise your child. You have a responsibility to raise your child, and therefore you have a right to raise your child. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, "Honey for the Badgers, I have started to wonder how much Title IX has added to the cost of college education with all the administration around it." Oh yeah. Let's look at Title IX coordinator average salary, because every university has one. So every university has to have a Title IX coordinator. In Ohio, that's $55K or $26.45 an hour, ranging from 38 and a half to 66, with some earners reaching 96,000, probably at bigger universities. So almost 100,000, right? For coordinating the office that deals with Title IX issues in the university. And then this person will have staff under them. So you have that individual making that much money, and then you have other staff that's probably making close to that much as well, because it's in an educational institution. And then also, if you have, say, a professor that gets tasked to be in a tribunal, right? Because they are coming in out of their hours, their regular hours. They're not coming in during their office hours. They're not coming in during their classroom hours. They're doing this on their own schedule. They get paid, right? So you have, and they have to keep records. So they have to have somebody handling all of the paperwork regarding any of these cases. And I don't know if they have to keep they do have to keep a database, but they have to report it, actually. It's part of the Clery Act. So if they have, Jane accuses Bob of looking at her butt and she's very uncomfortable about this, just something as simple as that, they have paperwork that they have to do that has to get sent in to the Department of Education because of that allegation. And they have to have like a whole thing of, here's what was accused, here's what we did about the accusation, here's the outcome of what we did if it was a hearing or anything like that, and here's the result for the student's education, the trajectory of the student's education that made the accusation. And so all that paperwork, everything has to be covered by, has to be done by somebody that gets paid. So yeah, it does increase the cost. In addition to FERPA, we have the other law that he mentioned, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, PPRA. So we have FERPA and PERPA. Also known as the Hatch Amendment. People have probably heard of the Hatch Amendment. This is more specific about the instruction materials. This is from 1978, and this was where, like, they've interpreted FERPA to mean this, and then they've said, well, we got to have something in writing. We've got to have something on the books. So this is where it's on the books. Parents or guardians have the right to inspect all instruction materials, including teachers' manuals, films, tapes, or other supplementary materials used in connection with any survey, analysis, or evaluation as part of an applicable program. This ensures transparency that allows parents to understand the educational content provided to their children. And this, if your kids are watching a video in school, say, about how the heart works, you have the right as a parent to say, I want to see what's in that video. So if your kids are watching a video in school about how gender works, you have the right as a parent to go in and say, I want to see that video. My child is being tested on the material from this video. Okay, I have the right to see that video. I want to see it. And the school cannot tell you no. Under this law, this is federal law, the school cannot tell you no. Guess what they've been doing for the last 5 years? They've been hiding this shit from parents. You go in and you say, I want to see that video. I want to watch that, what this woman is saying to my kids, in this video. You get told no. You don't have the right. In fact, we're going to call the cops on you, and we're going to give you a rough time. If you go to a school board meeting and you ask to see the manuals, like what's the teacher instructed to tell the students? Nope, you can't see that. And we're going to call the cops on you for asking.
That's some bullshit.
There
That
have
is
been many
straight up
parents
bullshit.
arrested. Yep. There's video after video on YouTube of parents getting hauled out of school board meetings and arrested because they are complaining that the schools are withholding these materials. Or a kid brings home a library book that has literal child porn in it. And it's I guess it would be considered it is under some current laws, but it would be considered legal because it's artwork, drawings, instead of any actual children being victimized in the course of creating it. But it doesn't belong in the public school system, right? It doesn't belong in your child's classroom or your school library. Your child should not be getting access to that. If people draw those pictures for their own entertainment, whatever kind of sicko they are, if that's all they do, I want to see the focus more on people who are kidnapping other people's kids and molesting them and photographing them and stuff like that. Stop those guys first, and then you can address the people that are drawing stupid pictures. But if they're showing them to children, that's a different story. They start showing that shit to children, then I'm gonna get on the wood chipper bandwagon right there. Right, that's trying to train children to view child sex as normal, which it's not, and it never will be. It will never be anything but harmful. And there is no argument that you can make that will change that. So this inspection of materials is very important. And what's been happening during the last 5 years is students have been bringing those books home. Then parents have been bringing them to school board meetings and reading them. And the school board decides that it's too racy and they can't read that into the record. And if parents don't shut up, they call the cops. They'll have school board meetings where the room doesn't have enough space in it for the number of people that want to be there and tell the school board they don't like what is being done with their students. And the school boards are refusing to listen to the people. And
Jesus.
Yeah. There have been times where parents get up and say, this is child abuse. You are abusing our children and we want you to stop. And police are called to arrest the parent for complaining to the school board, stop abusing our children.
I would be infuriated.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm glad I don't have to deal with this. I don't have children. I'm not going to have kids. There's so much that I want to say, but none of it matters because I don't have to deal with it, And
This
I
still
have
matters, though.
It does. It absolutely does. I would lose my shit if that was happening to my child. They came home and told me that I can't see what you're learning. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Imagine your child comes home and says, our teacher gave us a book today that says, even though I think I'm a boy, I might be a girl.
Jesus.
Even though I have boy parts, I think I might be a girl because my teacher said so.
How is that not grooming?
That is what everybody's calling it.
Yeah. Like, that's exactly what the fuck it is. But, oh my God.
Yeah. Imagine if your student came home, your fourth grader came home with a book on how to properly give a blowjob.
Mm-mm. 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 You'd be seeing me on the news that night.
Mhm.
That's all.
People are thinking Gen X parents are going crazy because they're going into school board meetings and going on tirades about this stuff, right? But that is happening to their children. There was a father that got arrested because he showed that book at a school board meeting and said, "My son brought this home. My son brought this home from his elementary school library. This is a book on how a boy gives another boy a blowjob. You want me to read it to you?" And they said no, and he started reading it, and they had him arrested. Right. So there have been several instances like that. There have been moms and dads arrested. There have been school board meetings where they shut down the meeting because parents were making comments or asking questions about school practices that they disapproved of, and there have been instances where students have had to sue. There was a sexual assault in Virginia where the school tried to cover it up and kind of leaned on the student and the family to just let it slide because it was a G mafia issue. So what does this law say? Surveys and evaluations, meaning tests, surveys of students that for information for the school. Evaluations, meaning if they're evaluating the students' like capabilities, not just are you passing the classroom materials, but like we had the Iowa basic tests when we were kids. Gen X did. I don't know what they're called now, but there's a similar test now. There's the SAT test, the ACT test if you want to enter university. Those are all considered evaluations, right? If when we were kids, they sent people in to evaluate our hearing and our eyesight as well. I got my first pair of glasses because that evaluator suggested that my parents take me to the eye doctor at the age of 10. So, I mean, there are things that they were doing in the school system that were very valuable. But then, now they've got this stuff, right? And they had some weird stuff too. Like when they were evaluating us for the gifted class, I remember a series of questions that was just odd. And I kind of refused to participate. I got asked about my nightmares and stuff. Like that was kind of weird. Yeah. Anyway, like so they started doing that stuff a long time ago. But for instance, they can't ask you certain things. What do you believe politically? What kind of mental or psychological problems do you have? If you have a student that has mental or psychological problems that needs an individual educational plan, that's something that the parents arrange with the school and the child's medical team. They don't ask the kid about that. Same thing with sexual behavior. They're not supposed to ask you if you're having any kind of sexual thoughts or feelings or any behaviors. They're not allowed to ask you without prior consent from your parents, at least. If you're, like they can't even ask if you're a smoker because it's illegal for kids to smoke. Any self-incriminating or demeaning behavior, they can't ask you what you think of your family. They can't ask you about your church. And they can't ask you about income other than having your parents fill out forms to determine whether you're eligible for the free school lunch program and stuff like that. Right. And that goes to the parent. The student doesn't fill that out. Right. And the parents have the right to see everything that you fill out. They have the right to know everything you told the school and everything the school asked you. And if you have to have physical for sports, if the school has a doctor that does that, they have your parents have the right to that information. If you have to go to the school nurse, and the school nurse checks you over to make sure that you're okay after you fell on the playground, or you have your first migraine, or something along those lines. The parents have a right to a full report, right? So the gist of this is that under these two laws, it is expected that the school does not hide any information from the parents, and that is to protect the child from exploitation, manipulation, psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, all of those things. If there are no secrets, then the parents are able to protect the child from any type of abuse that might occur within the institution. And that's erasing educational history in the United States. This enforcing this law that is 50 years old is erasing the educational history of the country. And it's misogynistic, guys. Preventing teachers and administrators in your school from abusing your children is misogynistic. What an odd thing to say. How very odd.
The feminists have figured it out that all you got to do is throw a little misogyny at anything and just see who's not paying attention.
Yeah, it's just like we can use sexisms as a shield for any despicable thing that we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Anne of Arc gave us $5 and said, if my child's teacher told them not to tell me or my husband something that happened or talked about at school, I'd have the teacher and admin by the short hairs real quick. There are lawsuits over this, by the way. There are parents who have had to sue their children's schools for violations of the Hatch Act and for violations of FERPA because these schools are hiding information about the students' educational experience, right? They're not telling the parents what the kids are learning in school, what's happening to the kids in school. There are kids that have been bullied for being normal now, right? Oh, you don't go along with this new gender mafia thing. Okay, well, we're going to pick on you at recess now, right? You don't solve homophobia by making the straight kid the kid that gets bullied at recess. You solve it by making it so that no kid is the kid that gets bullied at recess.
Mm-hmm.
We have no child left behind. We need no child kicked in the behind.
Yeah.
So then we have another, right? So here we're looking at the educational end of it. Yeah, let me make sure. I don't think I opened this one ahead of time. Yeah. So I'm going to close these other things. And again, protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. So this is the same National Organization for Women. Think of the pattern here. All right. They're mad that parents have to be told what's going on with their students. They're mad that students who are falsely accused of sexual misconduct get due process rights. They're mad that students are being protected from browbeating, indoctrination in their schools. So they're mad basically that students are being protected from all forms of abuse in their schools by their teachers that would direct them to certain gender-based beliefs and decisions made based on those gender-based beliefs and gender ideology-based beliefs, right? Questioning their identity. If you want to drive someone nuts, if you want to really gaslight someone, if you want to make someone unable to tell you no, You make them so confused about their situation, their identity, what's right and wrong, what's true and false, that they don't know which way to go. They can't take a step forward because they can't necessarily believe that the ground in front of them is real. You make them so insecure about that stuff that they don't do anything without asking you first. That is a specific method of coercive control that is used in various types of abuse, whether it's in an intimate partnership or whether it's by an authoritarian system, whether it's by an authority figure, and it's a particular type of child abuse too. Groomers use this to prevent children from resisting, objecting, or seeking help to end sexual abuse, by the way. And it fucks with your head so bad. Like, it's like being in a maze where the walls are constantly changing. And you know how if you're not sure about a maze, if you just keep one hand, on the wall and just trace, eventually you're going to find your way out, right? But not under that circumstance. Under that circumstance, you're going to run into wall after wall and you'll never find your way out. It makes you entirely dependent on your abuser, so that your abuser not only determines your reality, but every decision that you are able to make. You can't say no. You can't seek help. You can't do anything but obey, because you've been not just brainwashed, but your brain has been shut off. Or rather, it's been so overloaded, it's like a DDoS attack on your brain. Right? And you are being denied the service. Every time you try to make a decision related to your own safety and your own protection, you short circuit, you don't know what to do. And it's one of the reasons why victims of molestation have such a high suicide rate.
And it's how slavery works. We like to think that it's all just Europeans just picked up wild Africans and made them work, and they just automatically did. No, the slave mentality. Slavery exists because of the slave mentality. Because people have been brainwashed in this way to just accept their fate. Like in a lot of the movies, you'll see when the slave driver crashes their wagon, the slaves finally decide to take their moment to beat up the slave driver and then run away into the wilderness. That's not how the mind of a slave works. If that happened, the slaves would do everything they can to save their master. Because a slave is not just a free man who's been put in the service of another free man. A slave is someone who's been mentally broken, where they can't imagine a world without their master. This is often implanted on instincts that are sort of based on family. It's like the humble cuckoo. If you simply implant an idea into a child's head, they will believe that for the rest of their life. And when I say child, I mean 12 or less. Under the age of 12, it's trivial to implant an idea in a child's head and have that idea remain implanted for their entire lives. And this is why it's extremely important that we don't allow this to happen. Certainly not on a governmental level, on a level that is implemented and perpetuated by the government through these things we call schools. Like, human beings' brains are very delicate in general, but children's brains are exceptionally delicate, and anything implanted into their brains with enough force in an early stage of their lives will create mental illness, honestly. Even if it's just devotion to whoever it was who brainwashed them, it's mental, it's crafted mental illness. And this is why it is important to have authoritarian measures in place to prevent people from brainwashing children. It's difficult to brainwash an adult. It is trivially easy to brainwash a child. And this is why it should not be allowed. Some measures should be in place to prevent people from brainwashing children. Because a generation of brainwashed children is, well, it's happening right now, isn't it? It's happening all around us. This is what we have devoted our lives to complaining about.
Yeah.
Generations of brainwashed children, each more insane than the last. And we found ourselves in this position right now. Best of luck to anyone who wants to describe this fucked up situation that we found ourselves in now, of several generations of brainwashed children, each more brainwashed than the last. It's difficult to describe, but we do our best to describe it.
Yeah. Well, what's really shit about it, honestly, it's not just this one moment in the public education system in the United States, right? So the generation that birthed the baby boomers, the generation they came from, was referred to as the silent generation. Like, they were, they sort of came out of the Great Depression and all that, right? And there's also, I think they came from the generation known as the Greatest Generation. But in any case, like, they sort of were the movers and shakers of getting this educational system established. And with it, they created a tool that could have been used to provide American students with the greatest advantages during their childhood that they possibly could have, right? They could have studied how children learn and then used that knowledge to increase children's speed of development in areas like their grasp of arithmetic and logic, their grasp of language use and communication skills, their understanding of human history, their ability to use that combination of information, their ability to use understanding the scientific method and how to evaluate things and so on, to build and create and administrate systems in the United States that would have made a great and secure and prosperous nation permanently, like indefinitely into the future. And they started to do that. The silent generation started to do that. And when the boomers got into the education system, they started indoctrinating students with communism. Right? My generation started getting more and more communist bullshit in our curriculum that was introduced by the teachers union. The teachers' unions fought tooth and nail for control over the schools. They had a procedure, a process by the way they did this. So let's say they go into Ohio and they want control of the Ohio school system, right? And Ohio is mostly rural. Like there's some big cities here, but not huge big cities, not so many. Like we've got Cleveland, right? We got Columbus, we got Dayton, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron. We got some big cities, but they're not big cities. They're not LA, they're not New York. Like our biggest big city is Cleveland. The rest of the state, the city that I grew up in, had 8,000 people in it. One of my best friends in high school came from a nearby city, a nearby town, had 500 people in it. Their entire school system in their community, from kindergarten all the way up through all of the classes in the high school and the school board, school administration, everything was all in the same building, one building. Their graduating class had 18 students the year that she graduated. And that was a big class for them. Right. So, my graduating class had a couple hundred, maybe not even a couple hundred. Like my husband's graduating class had like 1,000. But he was from a different community. But there's schools, that are small enough that a few dozen kids is their entire senior class, and sometimes it's not even a few dozen, just a few. And then there are communities where the school system stops at the 8th grade, and then the kids go to another community to go to high school because the community is so small. There were 2 communities bordering my town where the kids had elementary school in their hometown, and then they came to our junior high and high school. They got bused, right? Or they went to another neighboring community, depending on which side of a particular country road they lived on. But in any case, all of that being said, right? So let's say the unions wanted to unionize the schools in Ohio. Previously, before they were unionized, Ohio schools, the teachers had something called a professional association. It was not a union. It did not arbitrate the way unions did. It didn't argue the way unions did. Teachers bargained with their school systems as professionals, and the goal, everybody's goal, was to maximize the benefit to the student. And so if they bargained for pay or benefits, it was to attract a better caliber of teachers to the school and not have the school get left behind, when it came to having a good science teacher or having a good math teacher because some other school was offering better benefits, And of course, you had to go to the community and raise money if you needed to increase, school benefits for the teachers and pay for the teachers and stuff. So there would be, you'd have to have a tax levy if they were going to do that. So it was not, it wasn't workers versus administrators. It was, what can we do to make our school system the best it can be in these situations? A lot of the rural areas, the schools and the teachers got along great. They were able to get through this process without unionizing, without threatening strikes or anything like that. It was all about arguing your case and convincing the other side of the discussion that what you were asking for would benefit the students, ultimately, and how it would benefit the students. And that was the way that they liked it, and they didn't want to unionize, so they constantly voted against unionizing. And so what the unions did was they got it changed so that instead of school systems choosing for themselves, they had a statewide vote. And initially they went with, every school system had a vote. whether that they would force the union system on the entire state. And the rural school systems outvoted the urban school systems. Like, you guys can unionize if you want, but we don't want to, and we're not going to. So they continued to push this every year. They had a vote every year until they couldn't get it. They changed it to each individual's vote counted. And because the urban centers, the populations in the urban centers dramatically outweighed the populations in the rural centers, the urban teachers voted to override the rural teachers' wishes and impose unionization on them, and made it that the state is a closed shop. They did this in every state in the union, where they held votes over and over again until they got the teachers' unions in control of each state's school system. And then the teachers' union started controlling the curriculum. They started controlling every aspect of, here's who you can hire. Here's the criteria that you have to use for hiring. And it isn't just, is this person good at their job? It's political. How many of your teachers are women? How many of your teachers are minorities? How many of your teachers are LGBTQ, right? And the rural teachers, the country teachers, small town teachers, they didn't have anything they could do about it, right? Small town administrations didn't have anything they could do about it. In fact, the unions control the school boards now. And once they got in control, once they had everybody under their thumb, the voting stopped. They don't vote every year on whether to stay with the unions. They only voted every year on whether to unionize. And then they stop as soon as they get what they want. And there is no more asking the people what they want. So, Missile Launch says, solution, pull your kids out of government schooling. Once upon a time, I would have said, government schooling is very valuable because it allows for standardized practices and so on. But the standardized practices are bad, right? If your standardized practices are bad, your result's going to be bad. So yeah, pull your kids out of government schooling. If you can homeschool, do it. If you can get with a group of people that are homeschooling, do it. Right?
Yeah.
If you could send to a non-government school and keep track of what's going on in that school, do it.
You happen to have all the information in the world in a device in your pocket. Now, I don't know how you disseminate all that information to a child, but, the excuse isn't the same as it was 40 years ago. Like, how could I possibly teach my child all of the information in the world when all of that information is being gate-kept in the educational institution? Well, it's not. It no longer is. All the information in the world is literally available in a device in your back pocket. So there's never been a better time to homeschool your children. Again, I don't know how you divide all that information into courses and whatnot, but it's possible, it's feasible in a way it never was before. So I don't know, you figure it out. You're the one having children, whoever the fuck you are.
Among other things, there's a K-12 system that provides materials specifically for that. And it goes through every aspect of what your kid would learn in elementary school, what your kid should learn in elementary school, what your kid should learn in junior high, what your kid should learn in high school. There are multiple systems that provide, that are for profit, that provide available information. And then also there are networks of parents that use these, that, sometimes, parents homeschool and it's just mom teaching the kids or dad teaching the kids or both. But other times you have in your network, in your community, where there's maybe 20 families that are homeschooling their kids. And oh, by the way, Mr. Smith happens to be a retired air traffic controller. So guess who's going to be teaching higher math? All the students might show up at his house with some parents with them and everything, and learn various formulas. My calculus teacher in high school, by the way, was one of the air traffic controllers that was fired by Ronald Reagan for striking when they were protesting really reprehensible conditions. That it's one of the things that Reagan did that I understand that the law supported what he did, but I think there should have been a better solution. It's absolutely vital that our air traffic controllers have working conditions that make it possible for them to do their jobs to the best of their abilities and don't interfere with their work. Because when they fail at their jobs, people die. Just like you don't want to have bad working conditions for a surgeon. But, the nice thing about being able to network with other parents, having that those homeschooling materials and everything is, if you don't like something that is in, what the curriculum says, you don't have to use it. What your students are going to be trying to pass when they want to get their diploma, that's not going to include that stuff. That's not in the testing that they have to take in order to graduate. And it's not required for them to be indoctrinated with a lot of sexual bullshit in order to graduate. And at the same time, if your students, you got kids that you're teaching about their health and their bodies, or the history of the country, or any other thing that the teachers' unions have tried to insert indoctrination into. If you see something in the material that you think is not true, you have the capacity to get information with your students. Go into a library, go online, look at older history books, look at websites that give more of the story than, say, the materials do, and say, well, this is what the book says. And this might be what you're going to answer on the test, but I want you to remember the truth is right here. This is what you need to know. Right? And that way, when your kid graduates and they go on into the world, they're not stuck voting for politicians based on lies that are going to be a detriment then to their welfare as adults. So yeah, parents can, not only can you homeschool your kids, but you can do so with assistance. You can work with other parents to do it. You have there's actually quite a number of resources available, so you don't have to rely on this system. But for parents that just don't have the capacity to do that, maybe aren't confident enough, maybe don't think they're smart enough or whatever, school system still needs that reform very badly. And it's amazing to me just how hard a group that is supposed to be about women and women's rights is fighting to maintain a system of abusing children in the school. Right? It's just so misogynistic to prevent teachers from engaging in essentially psychological DDoS attacks on your children's brains. How dare you stop them from brainwashing and completely flummoxing your children so that they can't think for themselves and can't make their own decisions and become pliable, malleable little psychological slaves to the state. How dare you? That's misogynistic. Like I said, what an odd thing to say. And this with the how dare you stop medical professionals from engaging in surgery on young people whose minds have been, DDoSed by their teachers, and who have been manipulated and controlled by gender ideologues and aren't making their own decisions because they're not old enough. How dare you stop the medical profession from making thousands, maybe millions of dollars cutting these kids up and rearranging them in a way that's irreversible and may cause them to commit suicide when they get older. Why would you object to that? What's wrong with you? So this order basically says they can't use junk science to support this. They can't use gender-affirming care on children. They must eliminate policies that rely on WPATH guidance, including WPATH's Standards of Care version 8. And the Secretary of Health and Human Services has to publish a review of existing literature promoting the healthcare of children who assert gender dysphoria, rapid onset gender dysphoria, which didn't exist 10 years ago, by the way. That was not a thing. You never heard of rapid onset gender dysphoria until they started, creating 72 genders and starting to teach kids in school that they might be the opposite sex, and going after gay boys and autistic girls and trying to convince them that they're trans. So government's not going to fund any of this anymore. Yep, Richard Beer says that same marketing sold a lot of boob jobs to a lot of women. It did. In fact, it's almost the same thing. You take a woman or girl into a plastic surgeon's office, she could be a perfect 10, right? A woman or girl that is an absolute perfect 10, flawless, somebody that people would just die for a chance to talk to. Go in there, they will find something that needs fixed. Something's wrong with her nose, or something's wrong with her eyebrows, something's wrong with, when you frown, you get that wrinkle that shows you're having an emotion in between your eyebrows. We can snip the nerve that causes that, so you can't do that anymore. You'll look perpetually surprised for the rest of your life. It's really cute. Right? They'll give them Botox. They'll decide that their jaw is too weak or too strong, right? But I guarantee you could take every single woman, parade each and every one in the entire world through that office, one at a time. They would never get to one that they said, "Oh, you're perfect. We can't do anything for you. You should stop worrying about how you look." Because that's not their job. They don't make money doing that. Right? Plastic surgeons don't make any money on telling you that you look great and you don't need surgery. And doctors that do sex changes don't make any money telling you that you are going to grow out of this, or that your teacher inflicted it on you and you need to go to therapy and really evaluate whether that's how you feel before you do anything. So, yeah. We're getting rid of this. We're getting rid of the ability to first break down the child's connection with the parent, right? Then DDoS the child's brain so they can't think for themselves. Then fill the child's brain with ideology that is used to manipulate and control. And finally, subject the child to a bunch of expensive medical procedures that will require expensive lifelong maintenance. And a national organization for women is very awfully, terribly, horribly worried about how this will impact the women's. If you can't groom and surgically molest children and then profit for the rest of the child's life through whatever age they survive to, providing them with medical maintenance. The poor women's can't handle not being able to do that. What an odd thing to say. Almost as if the National Organization for Women has some other group of people, some other agenda that they're attached to that is more important than half of children's parents around the country. I wonder who that might be. We probably can't say it on YouTube. I think I've talked about it, as close to it as I possibly can. Like, using the word grooming gets us pretty close, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I just can't. I'm so glad that my kids are not in school now. They're all grown up. I hope this gets fixed before my grandson gets old enough to be subjected to it. He's getting close to being old enough. I hope that Trump is able to so completely hamstring that system that they can't recover from it. And I hope the next president that comes after him deals a death blow to it, because that has to stop. But with that, Richard Beer said there is an incoming super chat, but I haven't seen it. And I don't have any super chats that I'm aware of. Don't have any Rumble rants. So we are just waiting for this super chat. But in the meantime, what would you call the National Organization of Women if they? I guess that would be they'd stop being now and they could become NAP. Like that makes sense, right? Like they would be NAP. Guys, I don't know why it takes so long for those super chats to come through. We have to figure out something about that. I don't know if those can see it and I can't, but like, we're getting to almost 9:00 and it's time to close out the show. So I will, if I don't see it come through before I say the last thing, we're probably going to end up having to read it in the Patreon only after show tonight and then read it again next week on the show, because I just don't have, I can't just wait for it indefinitely. That's annoying that it takes that long. I don't understand why it does that. That happens sometimes with super chats too. Like, we get somebody will send one through, and then at the end of the show, I'll end the show and we'll go out of the live stream, and just as we're about to close everything out, a super chat comes through on YouTube, and it's like, well, it's too late to read it. Nobody's listening now because we're not streaming anymore. But the same thing happens with comments and so on. So I don't know what to tell you. It's the delay, I guess. But these things just don't come through as quickly as they should. And you would think it would be instantaneous, right? You think you click it and it just goes right through. But apparently, because everything involves a payment processor, it might take a few minutes for the system to send it through. But hey, at least it's not as bad as it was back in the 80s, where you pay for something and it might take 3 weeks for the check to cash, and then you don't get your thing until the
Oh,
check cashes.
jeez. Yeah, that fucking sucks.
Yeah. But on the other
Oh.
hand, back in the 80s, you could pay for something with your check, and you didn't necessarily have that risk of somebody stealing your checking account number on the level
Mm-hmm.
that you do with somebody stealing your credit card number. So I
Yeah.
guess, everything has every bright sunbeam has a dark cloud around it somewhere. So I guess the super chow is just gonna have to wait, because it is now 8:59. I am closing out at 9 o'clock. But thanks, guys, for listening. I know this was some dark stuff, and it's it's a line to toe, because like I'm not opposed to if people have a gender identity or a sexual identity that they strongly hold dear to them as adults. That's their business, right? I don't think that we should be going around telling people who they can sleep with or what they can wear and so on, as long as everyone involved is consenting adults. Aside from, like, your work might have a dress code, your church might have a dress code, and if people don't want to be assailed with visions of nude adults all over the place, areas that are clothing optional being one thing. Obviously, we shouldn't be running around naked in public, like some feminists like to do when they're protesting because they're narcissists. But I don't think we should be outlawing, like, just having a gender identity. I also don't think we should force people to respect it. Nobody should be going to jail for not using someone's chosen pronouns. Nobody should be getting fired from their job because they go to a church that says that it's a sin to be gay, even if their coworker is gay, as long as they're not badgering their coworker about it. And nobody should be getting fired for wearing a cross because their coworker thinks that badgers them about being trans or gay either, right? Just leave each other alone. Do your job, live your life, enjoy your friends and your family. And if you don't agree with someone else's lifestyle, don't join in on it. And as long as nobody is being forced into anything, that's all good. But unfortunately, the gender mafia doesn't think that way. Their idea is that if you're judged, you've been abused. If somebody doesn't like you, they're engaging in bullying by not liking you. If somebody doesn't want to be part of what you do, then they're denying you something you have a right to. They have boundary issues, in other words, and they believe in imposed speech, and they believe in imposed associations, and it's really clouded the issue. I think when we were growing up, Gen X kind of got things settled that you leave each other alone and you live your life, and you're friends with who you're going to be friends with, and you leave people alone if you're not going to be friends with them. And now this next generation, this next set of generations, we're seeing this complete turnaround where everything bad that people did in response to people being different is now being done in response to people not being different, and not conforming to being different, and not participating in your difference. And I think that's just as bad. Like, reverse conversion therapy is just as bad as conversion therapy. Reverse discrimination is just as bad as discrimination. And violence is still violent, even if you think that you have a good cause for it. So, with that,
Welcome to Honey Badger Radio, where we
Yeah.
badger people. And
Yep.
yes, the verb to badger is indeed synonymous with the verb to harass. But
Yes.
it's not like we're beaming this into your homes, like TV channels do. Our badgering is optional. If you would like to be badgered by us here at Honey Badger Radio, you have the option of doing so. And I think it's important that you do have that option because, to some degree, you need to be badgered. Lions need to be badgered because it's how the ecosystem works. You may think you're the king of the jungle, even though lions don't live in the jungle, but whatever. It's helpful for you as lions to have honey badgers in the vicinity who can bite your testicles off at a moment's notice if you get out of line. That's the whole point. Just because you have might doesn't make you right. It's one of those oft-cited logical fallacies. Might makes right. Yeah, might does make right. But bear in mind, there's a few honey badgers in your vicinity, and they don't give a flying fuck just how powerful you are. We will bite your bollocks off. And even if you inject venom into us, we will be like, oh, that hurt. All right, I'm better now. Fuck you! Like animals much bigger than us and animals much more venomous than us do not faze us. We will keep going. No matter how small we are.
And no matter how many letters you have behind your name.
Indeed. Honey Badger don't give a fuck.
Yeah. But in the meantime, if you want to maintain the ability to be badgered by us, regardless of our social media presence and such, that can always be taken away at the drop of a pronoun. Remember, honeybadgerbrigade.com is our website, has our blog on it. At the top of the page, there is a drop-down menu. You see the 3 lines, usually in the upper right-hand corner. Some computers it might show in the upper left-hand corner. You drop that menu down. You can look at all of our stuff that we've done and are doing. You can find our shows. You can follow our channels on various streaming platforms. And if you want to support us, you can find feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of that page as well. So the one that you got to remember is honeybadgerbrigade.com. But with that, I will thank everybody for listening. We still don't have that super chow. Thank everybody for dealing with it. Like I said, this is a dark subject. It's, every so often I got to go into the deepest muck of the muckety muck and dig up the absolute state of feminism, because I can assure you, you're not disgusted with them enough. Thanks to my 2 co-hosts for going through this dry material with me. Thanks to Brian making sure that we're able to do this in vertical as well as horizontal and running the show for me. And everybody else that works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.